Ever just look at a map and wonder, why is the world so incredibly unequal? Why are some countries so wealthy with people living long, healthy lives, while other places are just stuck in a cycle of poverty and chaos? It's one of the biggest puzzles out there, and today we're going to try and crack it, starting in one very, very interesting place. Our whole investigation kicks off in the city of Nagales. What's so special about it? Well, it's not really two cities. It's one city that's been sliced in half by the US-Mexico border. It's the perfect real-world laboratory to help us figure this all out. So, on one side of the fence, you've got Nogales, Arizona. On the other, Nogales, Sonora. And what's wild is that the people on both sides are basically the same. They share ancestors, culture, even the same favorite foods. They live under the same sun. But their lives, they are completely different. In Arizona, we're talking higher income, better schools, services that you can actually count on. But just walk across the border and it's a whole different story. Lower pay, higher infant mortality, and a daily grind against crime and corruption.
I mean, just look at the money. It's staggering. A family on the US side makes, on average, 3 times what a family on the Mexican side makes. 3 times. And they're living literally feet away from each other.
And that brings us right to the heart of our mystery. If you have the same people in the same place, what in the world could explain such a massive gap in how they live? All right, to get to the real answer, we have to play detective for a minute. And the first thing any good detective does is rule out the obvious but wrong explanations. So let's get into it. Is it geography? Nope, can't be. It's the exact same desert climate. What about culture or ancestry? No way, the people are all intertwined. Well, what about something like disease? Come on, we all know germs don't stop and show their passports at the border, right? So something else has to be going on here. The biggest clue has been staring us in the face the whole time. It's the fence. That border represents two completely different sets of rules, two different systems, and really two different ways of organizing society. And this right here is the key idea for this whole explainer: institutions. Now, when I say institutions, don't think of big marble buildings. Think of them as the rules of the game. They're the political and economic rules that shape everything. They decide if it's easy to start a business, if you can trust the police, if your vote actually counts. These rules create incentives, and those incentives are what make a place rich or poor. So if it's all about these different rule books, where did they come from? To get that, we have to jump in a time machine and go back about 500 years to when Europeans first showed up in the Americas and laid down two totally different blueprints for how to build a society. When the Spanish conquistadors landed in Latin America, they weren't interested in building a new world. They had one goal: get rich and get rich fast. Their whole colonial model was basically a super efficient machine built for one purpose: extraction. The Spanish playbook was simple and incredibly brutal. First, you capture the local king. Then you take all his gold. Then you just take over the local tax system that was already in place. And to top it all off, they set up systems of forced labor, like the Mita in Peru, where they forced thousands of men to work to their deaths in silver mines. The entire system was designed to vacuum up wealth from the population and shoot it straight to a tiny elite. Now, you'd be forgiven for thinking the English were different, but guess what? When they got to North America, their plan was exactly the same. Copy the Spanish, just one small problem for them. It was a spectacular failure. Yeah, that whole get-rich-quick plan just did not work in Virginia. Why? Well, for starters, there was no massive centralized empire like the Aztecs to conquer. There was no gold just lying around. And maybe the most important reason, the English settlers themselves couldn't be forced to work for peanuts because they could just walk away, escape into the enormous American frontier. So this epic failure in Jamestown became a massive turning point. The colony was literally about to collapse from starvation, so the company in charge had to do something completely different. They had to change the rules of the game. At first, they tried ruling with an iron fist. You could be executed just for stealing some corn. That led to what's known as the starving time. It didn't work. So in 1618, they totally changed their strategy. Instead of threats, they offered incentives. They created the headright system, basically saying, hey, if you come work here, we'll give you 50 acres of land. And then a year later, to make people stay, they gave them a political incentive, the General Assembly. For the first time, settlers had a say in their own laws. And right there, that's the beginning of a whole new path.
And you can just see how these two paths shot off in opposite directions. The Jamestown path eventually led to broader political rights and a constitution designed to limit the power of any one group. Meanwhile, in Mexico, independence wasn't a revolution for the people. It was the local elites getting rid of the Spanish so they could keep the old extractive system for themselves. The result? The US gets a century of incredible innovation, while Mexico gets a century of chaos.
And just how unstable was it? This number says it all. 52. Mexico had 52 presidents in its first 43 years as a country. Just try to imagine building a business or planning for the future in that kind of environment. Impossible.
Okay, let's jump back to today. Does all this history really still matter? Oh, absolutely. And you can see it crystal clear when you compare how two of the richest men on the planet made their money. So you have Bill Gates. He built his fortune on technological innovation. But even when he was the richest man in the world, the system, the institutions, put a check on his power. The US government actually sued Microsoft for being an unfair monopoly. Now look at Carlos Slim in Mexico. His fortune exploded after he used his political connections to buy the state-owned telephone monopoly Telmex. His institutions let him create a monopoly and protect it. Gates's institutions tried to break one up. That is the perfect picture of what we call inclusive versus extractive institutions. So, after all that, what's our final verdict? What's the real answer to why some places are rich and others are poor? Well, it turns out it really is all about the rules. Ultimately, it boils down to something really simple yet powerful. Politics determines the rules. A country's political system, whether power is shared or held by a few, that's what decides what kind of economic system it's going to have. And that economic system is what makes people prosperous or keeps them poor. And this also explains why things are so hard to change. These bad extractive systems stick around because they work perfectly for the powerful elites who control things. Someone like Carlos Slim has zero incentive to change the rules that made him one of the richest men alive, even if changing them would help millions of other people. And that leaves us with one last, really challenging thought. If we know the rules are the problem, and we know the people in charge often benefit from those very rules, then the biggest question of all is, who has the power to change them, and how do they do it? That's the real challenge at the heart of this whole thing.